So here we are again for part 3 with my Nana, Lois Griffiths. And Nana, as I said, was born in Perth in 1924. So it was her 96th birthday this year. And I've been, for the last 2 ones, I've been asking Nana lots of questions about her life. And Nana being Nana, she decided to write down the anecdotes that she wants to talk about, and she's got them all written on a piece of paper. Show everyone your notes, Nan. Yeah, see? And also from the family, Nan's been taking requests. So this time, it's going to be much more about just Nana telling me stories, and I'm going to just ask for more details and more information and maybe go off on tangents. And let's see how many of your notes we cover.
Well, we'll try.
Okay, thanks,
Never
Nan.
short of words, you know.
No, I don't know where I got that from.
No, I don't know either, Pete, you know. So, the silver.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if anybody ever said to me, my children growing up,
Mm-hmm.
I'm bored.
Mm-hmm.
I never used to say anything. I used to go and get the silver, which I had a hell of a lot,
Mm-hmm.
rags and cloths, and say to them, when you finish that, you won't be bored.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this came back to bite me a while back.
Mm-hmm.
But I did hear some of my grandchildren conversing, and they said, never say you're bored when you go to Nana, because you'll get the silver.
Mm-hmm.
And a while back, I happened to say on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
I was a bit bored.
Mm-hmm.
And quick as a flash, my son David said, get out the silver.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know when these things are going to come back to her.
Mm-hmm. So Nan, before we move on to the next one, just for other people, you said you were on Facebook.
Mm.
So, as you know, so Nan, you're 96, you're on Facebook.
I go on Facebook every morning and tell a story and listen. And sometimes when their language is a little bit high from my grandchildren, I remind them their Nana is listening.
Yes, you have reminded me when I've used a few choice words.
Yes, yeah.
I've seen you remind others. Now, just so Nan, so that means you're 96 and you're on a computer and you're on the internet, and we will come back to your notes. How did you learn how to use a computer? How did you find that?
Well, I had to learn a new language
Mm-hmm.
because from these days standard, low and all this sort of business, it was all foreign to me because I learned correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, but it was well worth there because I get such a lot of pleasure out of. And I know children don't write letters anymore,
No.
but they keep me well versed in what's happening around them, and I just enjoy that.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that one of your friends was complaining that they never heard from their grandchildren anymore. Do you remember this one and how you told them to hop on a computer?
Yes.
Do you remember what you told them?
No.
All I remember, Nan, is that you'd said, one of my friends said, oh, I never hear from my grandchildren. And you're like, oh, I know what all of mine are doing. I see it on Facebook. And your friend had said, oh, I could never learn to use a computer. And you not being short for a word was like, well, then you deserve to get left behind.
Well, it's true. It's true. And you've got to move with the times.
Yeah.
And as I've always said to my people, oh, I think I'd like to do that. And I always say, have a go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll always think, I wished I'd done that and all that. So
Yeah.
you don't want it, to use an old saying, you don't want to die wondering.
Well, that's true. Now, so you went to the library to learn to use the computer, didn't you?
No.
How'd you learn how to use a computer?
Your father bought me one.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Really? So you didn't do a class or anything?
No.
Oh, I totally thought you did a class.
No.
Well, there you go. See, aren't you glad we have this on film now? Otherwise, I'd be telling lies about you after you're gone.
No. Well, the woman wanted to do, and I said, I know that. The library had that. And I said, no. I said, I fiddled around. I said, my son came and said, you do this, this and this. And I said, as he is electronics engineer or whatever, I took it,
Yeah.
scared. And I said, these days I have these stupid people ringing me up and telling me I've got a virus. And I said, well, why would I know that? I have a son that's an electronics engineer. And for your information, I haven't got one. So that stops them.
Yeah. That's good, Nan. So I didn't mean to go take you too far off
Well,
track.
we've done the silver.
Yep.
So next we come, I was in one of the doing shopping, and they changed the things around. And as you know, Pete, I talk to everybody. And there was this woman, she'd be in her 40s, I suppose, And I was fiddling there, and I said, I don't know. I'm blind in one eye and can't see out the other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, without a word, she took my hand and she led me into the next aisle. She got the item that I was looking for, still holding my hand, and took me to the checkout.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to sit outside the checkout until she came through with her trolley of stuff, so that I could go in and get my trolley of stuff. And I was hoping that she wasn't looking when I drove off in the car park.
Was that in Mona Vale or was that in Butterham? Or?
Up here.
Wow. So she thought you were blind?
Yes. And
Yeah.
some people have said to me, why didn't you say something? I said, no, how embarrassed that woman would have been if I had said something.
Yeah.
And she thought that was her deed for the day.
Yeah.
And good luck to her.
Yeah, that's lovely.
And I've always said, if someone tried to help you, accept it graciously.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So we went on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Mona Vale,
Mm-hmm.
all the mothers, because you see, we all worked in the school canteens.
Mm-hmm.
Because earlier on, you know, once you got married, you weren't allowed to work in the public service or any of those.
Right.
I think you all know that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was working because I was at this primary one day and I was at the high school the other, having a wide sort of family.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was giggling when they came in.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I said to one of them, I said, have I got dirt on my face or something? And then the other said, we must tell you, your youngest son at General Assembly this morning, and you know there's about 1,400 kids there, it was a big school, have got up and said to the General Assembly, he had the oldest mother in Mona Vale. I happened to be 39, and the one that took him to task was his eldest brother, Graham, and he was at high school. And he said, I'll have you know, I had the youngest mother.
Yeah, because there are
And
15 years between Elaine and Michael.
Yes. And there's quite a lot of difference between my older children there. But the family have never let him forget about it. And when he was 33 and living in Perth and his first child came, I sent him a card and saying, how would you like being the oldest father in Perth?
Yeah.
And he said, you have a long memory, Mum. I said, just remember that.
I remember being in Perth when Uncle Mick and Auntie Carly told us that they were expecting Chloe, which was with their first child. And you, after you'd done all the congratulations, then you looked up from dinner and said, well, that'll make you the oldest father in Perth.
That's right. And then my daughter Elaine, I was going to a soccer match with her children. And prior to when I was 36, she'd made me a cake, a heart-shaped cake. Instead of putting the candles on the top, she put them all around the side so it looked like a battleship in full. So when she was 36 and we were at a soccer match where her son's there, I made a cake, same shape, same tin that she had used, and gave her a replica. It helps.
Yeah. And did she take it in good humour?
All of my children are
Yep.
blessed with a good sense of humour. It runs through the whole of the family.
Yeah. None of us are short on a laugh.
And as you know, I've made some weirdo cakes, and it was the children's idea to catch me out in making a cake of their choice. And I must say, the worst two that I've ever made was for Elaine's girls. One wanted a record and a cake, and it could be a couple of centimetres thick. Did that. And the other one wanted a catcher's mitt of baseball, which was a hand with a ball in it. So they got it. And then Richard, he wanted a Big Mac. So I turned the tables on Big Mac. And I made him a Big Mac, but I made it as it is, like look at a bun with meat in it, or it was chocolate crackles and all that sort of stuff. And the disappointment on that kid's face. And I thought, well, I've hung on to this long enough. I had made him a Big Mac truck and with the wheels and all the rest of the jazz. And the one that makes the fancy cakes now is David for
Really?
his family. Yes, he does, because his son-in-law and had never had a homemade birthday cake all his life, and neither had his brother. So David makes them for them.
I remember, Nan, for my 10th birthday, you made me an Odie cake which was the dog in Garfield. And I'm, here I am 30 plus years later.
Well,
I
I had
so
one. I was
chuffed by it.
going out to Andrew, and he wanted a rocket.
Mm-hmm.
And I nearly launched that rocket in the back seat of the car because I bumped it up and down.
Yeah.
But there has been some
Yeah.
funny things there, but it was a challenge.
Yeah.
And the groups that I belonged to, I used to make cakes. For instance, I had Santa sitting on Ayers Rock and all these sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's pictures of them. You'll find them somewhere.
Oh, my 5th birthday party, you made me a farm with animals and everything. There are photos of it, but I just remember thinking it was the coolest cake.
Well, Elaine wanted one special, and she wanted a farmyard like she'd had as a child, so she had a replica on one of her birthdays.
Wow.
Yes. But anyway, all these things, and as you know, I've always made my own jewellery. If I didn't have anything to match the dress, well, I just went and made one.
That's right.
Yes, and I've always been into craft, and I think some people are gifted to do craft, and so if you know one, it helps you with another.
Yeah.
And my greatest joy when I taught handicapped people to do craft at the RSL Club in Pittwater, and that was an achievement. Even though I used to have to take it back, undo half of it and redo it so it looked reasonable.
Yeah.
But they thought they'd done it, and it gave them a sense of worthiness, and people need that.
Yeah, I think especially right now as we're all in the pandemic, I think we're all trying to find a sense of purpose in our days.
Yes, well, I feel sorry for those people.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm isolated like everybody else.
Yeah.
But I managed to pass the time away because I'm still doing craft.
Yeah.
And you're never too old to learn.
Oh, that's true.
And you can learn every day if you want to.
And so what craft are you working on at the moment, Nan?
I'm doing quilling.
That with the cards?
It was the paper. Making animals in paper, little thin strips of paper or flowers or anything, as you're all getting them now.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
Yes, I've got one for your father for his birthday.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll give it to him on Sunday.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, because I think about it, I've seen you paint tiles.
Yes.
So you do, and I have your tile paintings, which, thank you. They take pride and place in my apartment, Nan. You've made and painted quilts. I know that, you've done the quilts. You've done your own jewellery. Then there was a lot of stuff you did with rocks and rock polishing with grants.
Oh, yes, I've done that because, you see, I happen to be the president of a gem club up in Buderim. And I was taught to facet and everything by one of the people. In fact, I've got a ring that I made for myself. And Elaine wears one that I made, or she used to wear it, wherever it is now, but she's got one. But I just think that you can change your mind to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, you've made cards.
And I've made clothes
Yeah.
for everybody and all the rest, and I've made my own clothes since I was 9 years of age.
Yeah.
Because my mother used to make such frights.
Really?
Oh, shocking. She was good at boys' trousers because she had 5 sons. But when it came to me, she always made me dresses to grow into, but sideways.
Right.
So there was enough room for me and the girl next door.
Right.
So I learned to sew. As a matter of fact, when I was younger than that, I had a piece of sewing, which I've still got now. It went into the Royal Show in Perth, and I got it first prize for it.
Really?
And it's a little apron. Yes.
Yeah.
And I've still got it somewhere in there, whatever.
Well, I mean, Nan, I remember went down at Auntie Elaine's farm down at Chewina when they had the Easter parade.
Yes.
And you dressed us. You did all of our costumes for all of us, and all of us came away with a ribbon that year.
Yes, they always did.
Yeah.
Until it got so bad for them there to beat me, but I got wind of it. They hired costumes.
Really?
At Chewina, yeah.
Wow.
To try and beat me. They weren't going to have it.
Yeah, wow.
But I heard about it and I sent little Richard. He was only a little bloke. He looked like a Mexican, and he had a very lavish costume. They couldn't help but give them the thing.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, you keep upsetting all of these country folk, Nan.
Yeah, well, it's a challenge. The same down at Nanka's, we always won the fancy dress there.
Yeah.
And the kids used to get as much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah.
I had even to try and hide Elaine because they wanted this one. He was a smart aleck and smart by his name.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we've got to move these Griffiths kids out. So I heard about it. So they all wore costumes that they couldn't be seen.
Yeah.
The only one that I had was Humpty Dumpty, which was one of them sitting on a wall, and I disguised him that they didn't know, but the headmaster of the school, he thought it was wonderful because it was a two-teacher school, and he was a city person like me, and they put out so many challenges, you see.
Yeah.
But I had Elaine dressed as a Christmas tree, and she was up the centre, and I had all the things coming out and bells and all the rest of it. They didn't know who was up that tree.
Yeah.
And then St George and the Dragon, I had that.
Yeah.
And I had Graham as a woman pushing his sister in a pram. And I made a big dummy so you couldn't see her face. And she had socks on her feet and booties. And he had a dress of mine on, and he had dark curly hair or whatever. So to hide his short back and sides, he had this hat on, and I had put it back to front. And this bloke that had been so unkind, he said, you know, that girl reminds me of somebody. And I said, just fancy that. So they all had to go up the stage, and of course Graham took off his hat and he said, oh, these so-and-so Griffiths kids again. But it was up to them, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's how petty.
And to take it out on a child. But then I had a nasty thing that happened to me, and the kids, we were in Monavar, and they used to go to Sunday school. Anyway, I used to give them as used threepence to put in the plate. Well, this time I didn't have a threepence, so I gave them sixpence each. Not the two younger ones, it was Graham and Elaine and Greg.
That's about 10 cents.
Yeah, yes. Yep. So they put in sixpence and took out threepence change. And before they got home, the sidesman rang me up. Was I aware of what my children did? So I just said to him, for a supposedly God-fearing man that you say you are, and to pimp on little children is not my idea.
Yeah.
So they got no change from me.
Yeah.
And you know the story is, pick on my kids and you take me on.
Yeah.
Yes, and the same as I had words with the headmaster of Pittwater High. He'd come from a country school, and he was going to set the world on fire. But he had no public relations spirit at all. Nothing. And he said to me, I'm going to take Colby up. And I was working in the canteen there, as I've always worked in this kids' canteen. And he said, your son, David, I'm going to take him and put him into general classes. And I said, why would you want to do that? He topped primary, so why would you do that? He said, your son is a dreamer. I said, you don't want to do anything to my son, you want to take the teacher to task for making the story so uninteresting. So I said, you do that, and I'll take you to a higher authority.
Yeah.
So then, as you know, Bev was always tiny. But she belonged to the drum majorettes. It was there, and they used to go around. And this time, they came to a fete, and they gave an exhibition. And there she is, this Dot, doing a tap dance, as you know, a very gifted dancer, doing a tap dance on the top of a drum. And Gorrel was standing beside me, and he said, look at that one go. And I said, yeah, she'll be coming here next year. And he said, I won't have her. Too small, and all this sort of stuff. So I said, she will be, you know. He says, God help me, she's one of yours, isn't she? And I said, yes, and you will take it to a higher authority. I said, just live with that.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't right.
Yeah.
Yes, but, you know, it's terrible when you've got to come into bat when an adult is picking on children. I just don't like it.
You know, Nan, you definitely left your mark on that school, because I remember my first day of year 7, when I went to Pittwater. And the ladies in the office, the first one said to me, "Oh, you're Esma Leslie's grandson." And I went, "Yep, and that's my other grandmother," for the people who are watching. And the lady said, and before I had a chance to answer yes, the other lady said, No, you're Lois Griffiths' grandson." And I was like, "Yep." "Well, which one are you?" "Both." "Now that means that you're David's son?" "Greg's son." "Now he married, was it Jill?" "Yeah." So they all knew me before I'd started. My first, and there's all of these other kids behind me, and I'm thinking, this is not the way to look cool. You've already mentioned both my grandmothers.
And even poor old Michaela, she said, it's not good going to a high school where your uncles and your aunts have been, because they've all been prefects or something or other, and it's such a lot to live up to.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, whenever Mum and Dad were called into the principal's office to talk about me, I remember in about year 8, I walked out and there are all the photographs of Dad and all of his brothers and sisters, and they're all up in the main office. And I said to Dad, "You were all prefects and everything, and now you're here to talk to the principal about me. Aren't you proud?"
Well, you see, Graham was a prefect at Narrabeen Boys when it opened. And he was also the junior and senior athlete of the school.
Yeah.
So Michael aspired to do the same, and Michael was the junior and senior athlete of Pittwater High.
Oh, good on him.
But he had one more on his brother, because being on the water then, he had his own sailing, and he was do it for boating as well and he had a mirror under, that was the name of a yacht, and it was parked under our house. And they'd come and play with it and take it out on a weekend.
Yeah.
And then left the sails all there to be dried off. And who had to roll them up and put them under the house? Me. So I just said, you either come back next day, otherwise you can find somewhere else to store your yacht. So.
Yeah. So Nan, you mentioned that you taught, and it is segueing into one of your stories that I know you're going to talk about how you used to help intellectually disabled people at Pittwater RSL. You had a really long connection with Pittwater RSL, didn't you?
Yes, I was 37 years the president of Pittwater Women's Auxiliary. And because of that, they made me the first non-serviceman to get life membership.
Really?
Yes. And I also got a certificate of merit from the National RSL for services to ex-service.
Really?
Yes. And I used to do hospital visiting for them for 10 years until one of the blokes, because they all worked, didn't they? And when he retired, and he used to come with me as my driver then, and I said, if you're good enough to drive, you can take over this job. And he was pleased to do that. And my district was from North Sydney to Hornsby, and saw every hospital and whatever there. And usually, see, I used to take on, even if I saw somebody being disadvantaged, I would tell them so.
Yeah.
Because the RSL gave me money to spend on them and to buy them whatever that they needed, like in ways of perhaps just, well, they used to smoke in those days and all those sorts of stuff. And there was one man I remember I went to see, and he'd been dumped into the hospital and he had not one relative or one person to see him for the best part of a month.
Yeah, wow. And
I breezed in and I just said, oh, Pittwater RSL sent me. And how did they? Oh, I said, they know we're all what's doing. So he said, oh, well, he said, you're like a fairy on a Christmas tree. And I said, well, a pretty substantial one, I must say. And anyway, when I went next fortnight, he'd gone home.
Oh.
Because he'd got the will to get himself up and out. Otherwise, he would have languished there. It's terrible, people.
Yeah.
It's shocking. I've even gone to visit them on Anzac Day, knowing fully well how they missed being with their mates and all sorts of stuff. And you know, your grandfather was very good about, he didn't mind how much I did for the ex-servicemen, because he was a sub-branch, RSL bloke, and he's also on the board of directors of the RSL. So he just took it for granted as long as it didn't interfere with what I did for the children. And I used to make all the wreaths for the RSL on Anzac Day,
Mhm.
and for the sub clubs as well.
Mhm.
And the kids used to hate it.
Yeah.
Because my house would be awash with leaves making the wreaths, and if I ran out, I'd send them out to go and strip some of the street trees of their leaves, because they
Yeah.
all had to be dark green and shiny.
Yeah, I remember. I have memories of you doing it when I was very young.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been always that way, love,
Yeah.
and I've had a very fulfilled life.
Yeah.
Just not doing for prestige or anything, just doing it because I just felt that was me. After all, I
Yeah.
come from a server's house, don't I?
Yeah. Yeah, you do. So rather than me sidetracking you again, let's see what else you've had from via request.
Yes. Oh, the other thing was when we were travelling, as you know, we always used to go over to West Australia a lot, and this time we're going over with a Persia station wagon and a trailer.
So this was back with when you had all the children coming with
Yes,
you?
all the children with me. And we had a awning that we were able to touch with the Persia, and we had fold-up beds and things. We used to put them up. But this particular night we got on the Nullarbor, and the snakes were so bad, I was frightened for them.
So
And
just to stop you, Nan. So for those that don't know, the Nullarbor Plain is a giant flat piece of desert that separates Western Australia from South Australia, and it actually has the world's longest, straightest piece of road.
And the train line too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, that was that, and we were travelling along, and as you know, snakes go for their prey at night time.
Yeah.
So I was dead scared. So we couldn't put up our lean-to and our folding beds and all that. And so we all had to sleep in the Persia. So Les always had a piece of masonite that he used to put on the rack of the car to put all the extra specials on so it wouldn't damage his. So he hauled that off. And for somehow he made a shelf in the back of the Persia. He was very able to do these things there. And the little ones were in the top flight, and the big ones are down there, and Les and I slept as you would on the front seat, sitting up, of course. And we just said, and Les said to them, if you want to do a piddle in the night, you wake up your mother or your father, and we'll have the light, and you know your mother will always have the rifle. But no one wanted to that night anyway, and that we were able to proceed the next day. But you know, Pete, I've had the most eventful life and most interesting life that anybody could ever have.
Yeah, you have.
And I think how fortunate am I.
Yeah.
And I was blessed with the 6 of the best kids that anybody could have.
Yeah.
And you know, they knew their dad wasn't well. Never caused me one atom of anxiety. If I said to them, you've got to be home by 10 o'clock, they were home by 10 o'clock. And I know the boy down the road, he used to get that angry. His father was the carpenter. This was at Mona Vale. And he said, why is it that Greg's not on a curfew? And I said, because Greg has earned my trust. And I said, I always told the kids, if they told me the truth, they'd never get into trouble. But if I found out they were lying, they'd get everything at them. I never lifted, you know, their father never lifted their hand to them. He didn't believe in that. And never had to.
Yeah, Mum and Dad was the same, and Uncle Mick and Auntie Carly had said they were the same with their kids as well. Was always Michaela and I never had curfews. We just would we would negotiate them. I'm going here. What time do you want me home?
Yes, well, this is right.
Yeah.
And you know, in those days, which was wonderful, and Mona Vale is a big suburb and all that sort of stuff, we were able to leave the key in the front door so that they could all get in, and I was always aware when they were coming in, but I never said anything because they had to learn to be self-reliant, and I didn't want any of my boys to grow up mummy's boys. And their father being so quiet, and he said, we'll just keep an eye but don't say anything.
I mean, when Gramps was always
He'd had such a hell of an awful life himself. See, he was a gentleman.
Yeah, because he left home at 13?
13 and went round the Australia on a push bike.
Yeah.
And his father was a Welshman. He was born in Glenheath in Wales, and he had a softly spoken Welsh voice. And like Les could sing very well, but he only used to sing in the shower or whatever. But he shook hands with Les and said, just remember, your bank book is your best friend.
Yeah.
And Les worked his way and he had a very eventful life because he used to stow away on everything. And one time he was selling, and they said they never had any stowaways on the trans train, which it was called in those days. But Les was there.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
In the daytime, when they stopped, they had stock on board, he'd jump out and being a country boy, he'd get a stick and start prodding them up, the sheep or the whatever's there, and they all thought he was the boy travelling with that. And he went into a compartment of 8, which they were just compartments of 8 then. No car there, and there was some sailors going to Flinders. So they used to get him food and put him up in the luggage rack over their head to sleep at night time.
Oh, nice.
And another time, he was going from Port Hedland to Fitzroy Crossing, and he took with another 22-year-old, and he was only 16. They drove those cattle from Port Hedland to Fitzroy Crossing, and they never lost one animal.
Yeah, that's a couple of 100 kilometres.
Yeah,
Well, actually, it's 1,000, isn't it?
kilometres or
Yeah.
so. And then another time, he got on a ship and he was stowing away, and he thought that at Port Hedland, he spent a lot of time up there. He thought he was going up around the Kimberleys and all that, and he ended up in Singapore. So he had to get on a boat and get himself back.
Yeah.
But he's had all those, for a quiet man, he's had all the things. And I've had a basic life, but I've still had an interesting one. Just
You and Grant, I mean, did Gramps ever tell you the story about how when he was stowing away on an aeroplane and it wouldn't take off?
Yeah.
Did he tell you that one?
No.
So, and you know, because amongst the family, we've been talking about how Gramps shared stories with us, but he didn't necessarily share them with you.
No.
So when he was essentially, I mean, nowadays we'd call him a street kid or a rough sleeper. He was stowing away on a little aeroplane, and the plane wouldn't take off, and the pilot couldn't figure it out. And then he opened up the luggage compartment, and there's little teenage Gramps in there because the plane wouldn't take off because it was too heavy.
Too heavy. Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
You know, because he was a country bloke.
Yeah.
Quiet, but he was a doer just the same, you know. But he's always doing something like that. I'm not surprised at all.
And did he ever tell you about how when he stowed away on a ship and all there was green bananas?
Yeah, well, that was when he was in there and he ended up in Singapore.
Oh, that was that. Okay, yeah.
And another time he stowed away in a boat and only had peanuts. He said, you can guess what happened to me? He said, I almost flew around with the wind. And he says, just as well I had no companions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So it's really been great, and I have been really, really, Pete, but had a charmed life.
Yeah.
And sometimes I haven't known how close I was to having disaster.
Yeah.
But my guardian angel was on my shoulder and has been all my 96 years.
Yeah.
And for that I thank the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else have we got from request, Nan?
That was that, and I said about Gorrel. Oh, I must go back a little bit.
Yeah.
When we lived at McMahon's Port, we lived in these units. And we lived one overlooking the entrance, and we were 2 stories up. And it was these huge concrete colonnades, you know. And Graham was about 2. And lo and behold, I went out there one day, and he's on the balcony, riding that balcony like a horse.
Right. Brilliant.
And I thought, well, now if I make a die for him, he'll go over and he'll be smashed to bits.
Yeah.
So with my heart on my mouth, I went in and called to him. You know, Graham, like that, and being a good boy and doing as he's told, he climbed down of his own way, and I thought, oh, there. And the other time was Greg. Greg had a magnificent imagination. He always has. And we were in Angus, and it was lousy with snakes, as I've told you. Your grandfather used to go shooting them every week in the summertime. And he came in, and I said, what are you doing? Because he was always playing in the dirt, Greg, and all the rest of it. He said, I've been talking to my friend. So I said, your friend? Who came? He said, my friend the snake.
Oh dear.
So we went out. I said, oh God, your grandfather and I was in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went out to look at him, and there's Greg. The snake was swinging from back over his head.
Yeah.
It was coiled around the pipe that came in from our overhead tank water into the house.
Yeah.
And that snake's face within about a couple of inches away from Greg's face. And he's talking to it.
Was it an eastern brown?
Yes, a big brown.
Oh my gosh, and they would kill a child in
kill a snake.
7 minutes.
Yes.
I think an eastern brown.
And he was talking to his friend and shaking his head at it and all the rest of it.
Dear.
So I came back in and Les said, you look a bit pale. I said, yes. The friend he's talking to is a big brown. Yeah. So he said, call him.
Yeah.
So I called him and he came in. He said, what do you want? And Les dispatched it.
Yeah.
But he would take his trucks. He always had trucks and things. And he'd go in to where we had crops growing in the mounds, and he'd come up and he'd come face to face with one of these things and, hello. That was great.
Yeah, Dad's always been like that.
And he used to go, and I never knew, and I used to be dead scared. He'd go across the shearing shed, and we may have had dip there, and you'd feel a trail of clothes where he'd taken his clothes. But if he saw his dad on a tractor, and we had a canopy and all that sort of stuff, then I'd run like mad right through the paddocks to find him, and there he'd be sitting on his father's lap with a big grin. Yeah. So much so that he got a station wagon motor car for one of his birthdays, because toys came in pretty good then. And Les, it wouldn't be allowed now, but Les used to hook him up on the back of the tractor. Yeah. And he used to go all over the paddock with his dad. Yeah, in his little pedal car? Yeah, that's... I remember you were talking about Gramps being sick and how all the kids were really good about it. I remember one of the family jokes is Uncle Graham talks about ploughing the fields when he was 5 or 4. Graham could plough. When he was a kid, he's still in primary school. He could drive that tractor as well as any man. And where if Les or myself was going to go through the gate, we'd stop the tractor, put it in low gear. When we had a boom on, Graham never. He had about an inch either side clearance of the gate, and he'd go right through. Wow. Never once did he hit it. Wow. And your father was driving a tractor when he was about 4. Yeah. You know, they used, being the heart was in your mouth with them. Yeah. But nevertheless. I think that's why they're such safe drivers, actually. Well, I think so. They've always been very good and safe drivers. Because Les's belief, because I told you about me leaving the car outside of Journey and doing the shopping. Yeah. You've been sitting there long enough. Yeah. And that's what he said to the boys. You don't need me to show you. You've been sitting here long enough. You should know. Yeah. And we did. Yeah. And, no, it's gone. It's gone? Yeah, well, that's right. Well, I've talked to you. They asked me to talk to you about the snake. Oh, and I've talked to you about meeting Les's parents, haven't I? You did last time when you went over that, and you said that Gramps' mum was not a particularly nice lady. She was a witch. She came to visit the farm once after Gramps' dad had died, didn't she? And she was pinching Elaine and Graham while I wasn't looking, and to get them into trouble. So Graham had a Tommy Hawk, and he's always been one of these, and he'd do the morning sticks for me. So I had a combustion stove, you give it a sticks to keep on going and all the rest of it. And it was Elaine's job to set the table. So when no one was looking, this old bird would burn the sticks so he'd get into trouble. And instead of having the knife and fork in the right direction, she'd put it back to front, so she thought, but I was aware of what she was doing to the children, so it didn't work. Yeah. And that's when she started picking on Graham as a little boy. And how old were they? Well, Elaine was only, the first time she was only, well, I don't know how old she would have been there. The first time we met her, she was 2.5, and Graham was not quite 12 months. So it was older than that. Oh, wait, you were pregnant with Dad, I remember you telling me. Yes, and she said she wouldn't have come over if she'd known I was going to have, and I was having terrible trouble having your father. Yeah. I'd lost a baby prior to that. There's 5 years between Graham and Greg, you see. And of course, I think it was a blessing that that little baby didn't survive.
Yep.
Because Les wasn't really fit enough to be fathering a child, and
Yep.
we found out afterwards that it had all sorts of issues.
Mm-hmm.
Now, handicapped children have a bad enough time in this world
Mm-hmm.
when it happens to them afterwards, but to be born handicapped would have
Yeah.
been a bit there. And I went into Gundagai Hospital to have Greg, and I was there some time.
Mm-hmm.
And they, because having miscarried, the nurse said to me, "Oh, we've had this bed waiting for you for ages." So they kept me there. And Grandma Griffiths was in the hospital too, because the doctor put her in there
Mm-hmm.
to give me a break,
Yeah.
because I've told you that. And
Yeah.
putting herself on a diet and all this sorts of stuff that I couldn't do. And he came over and he was so pleased to think that Greg was alive, actually.
Yeah.
And he said, "You've got to go and see your grandson." She wouldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
So he frog marched her over to see me.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't interested. She just said, "If I'd known you were pregnant, I would have never come. I want you to look after me." And on the other hand, I only came over because I was going to break up this marriage,
Mm-hmm.
because I thought Les was the best provider out of all my sons.
And how many children did she have?
She hated children. Both
Mhm.
Les's parents had been married before, and they both had children.
Mm-hmm.
But Les was the eldest of their marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, she'd had 7 sons.
Right, so she had 4 to her first marriage and then...
And 3, No,
Yeah.
I think she had 3 to her first marriage and
Yeah.
4, and the little one died at 4.
Oh,
He was younger than Stan.
okay.
But she loved Stan, her
Mhm.
youngest one,
Mhm.
and he even had private education.
Wow. Whereas
Yeah.
Grabs was, see you later,
he
Charlie,
was
at
kept
14.
home to even do the washing, and
wow.
and she used to flog him because his father was on the railways, and when
Mhm.
and she used to belt hell out of Les because she didn't want him in the
Yeah.
first place,
Wow.
with a copper stick.
Wow.
Now, a copper stick, for those that don't know,
Mm-hmm.
is about 1 metre long
Wow.
and about 1 inch in diameter thick.
Made out of copper?
No, wood, but it was a hell of a stick to
Yeah.
get a little kid.
Yeah, that's horrible.
But he never pimped on her or anything.
Yeah.
And then she said if his father was on night duty and he wanted to sleep in the day, she'd make Les go into it and stay with him, so she didn't have to be bothered.
Wow.
And for her son, if she had all these sons, her sons
Mm-hmm.
from her first marriage,
Mm-hmm.
3, they were much older than
Mm-hmm.
the father's children, like
Mhm.
Les's, and he had half sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so nasty to them that when they were 14 and 15, getting belted and that, they went to Perth.
Wow.
And they never came back to see them. But
Wow.
when we were over in Bonavale,
Mm-hmm.
they came to see me.
Oh, lovely.
Years and years after.
So Gramps grew up with his father's children?
No,
No?
not much. No.
Oh, but they were, okay, and
Yeah.
but his mother's children were, did they live there or were they already grown up and out of home?
They used to come.
Yeah.
But the youngest one of those was the nastiest person.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to take them on. When, see, Ron and Stan were both in the Navy like your grandfather was.
So
at
those
first.
Gramps' 2 younger brothers?
Yes.
Yeah.
And when they came into Sydney, into Port,
Mm-hmm.
they'd come and stay with me.
Mm-hmm.
I was the sister that they never had.
Yeah.
And they were both married,
Mm-hmm.
and that we used to go to the movies because
Yeah.
they weren't cheating on their wives or anything, and I was their sister.
Yeah.
And they just stayed.
Yeah.
Well, this nasty one of the mother's
Mm-hmm.
youngest one of the her first marriage,
Mm-hmm.
he came and he was nasty.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "No, I want the privileges that Ron and Stan have had." And I said, "What do you mean the privileges?" He said, "Well, they sleep with you, don't they?" So, and he wanted the same, so I didn't say anything. My dad lived upstairs. I said, "Come in." So he ordered him out
Yeah.
and said, "You needn't bother coming." So he came again once. And in those units there, they had a little alcove at the back.
Yeah.
We didn't have fridges, had ice, and it was so that the iceman, you kept your vegetables in there. So what did he do when he found out that he couldn't get in? He stole all my food out of the ice
Yes.
box, which was on coupons.
Oh my gosh.
But he ended up in a psychiatric hospital
Yeah, wow.
anyway. So
Wow. So now I do want to ask a little bit, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's understandable. So you were pregnant with a child that you lost in between Dad and Uncle Graham.
Mm.
How far along were you when you?
oh, just 4 months.
Okay, but still, you would have in those days, did you talk about it? I know nowadays women talk about it more, and I remember.
No, because in those days they always said it was the woman's fault,
Okay.
and if you had things that wasn't your fault, you know.
Yeah.
Yes, but no, and I just said that my guardian angel was on my shoulder because that poor little thing would have had a life of misery, and it wouldn't probably have got past.
Yeah.
You know, it would never have got to being a teenager.
Yeah. I see that we're cracking along in time, so I'm going to ask you, Nan, because let's end her on a happier note. How about you tell me one of the happier ones, because I'll be back next week and you will have had more requests by then, and we can also finish off.
Happy note?
Yeah, happier note.
I've had lots of happy
notes.
notes.
I know, that's why I figured it'd be easy for you to end it on a happier note.
Well, I'll have to see, because I don't know which one I would have. Oh, I used to be the producer and presenter of a thing at Pitwood RSL. We used to put on a review every 3 months, and we'd choose a subject and we'd get all dressed up and all the rest of the jazz and a presenter. And the club used to close the doors, and people, if they came in, they'd have to pay and buy the meal that we had produced. And the girls were really lovely, and I never asked anybody to do something I wouldn't do myself. And one happy day, one girl, she was always half a beat behind others, and you couldn't help it.
Yep.
So we made her a feature. She was always that. And one day she was doing her thing, and the elastic in her pants fell off, and she lost them. So she just didn't do any cares. She got down, we were doing a Hawaiian number at the time, and she rocked herself in Hawaiian music, picked up her knickers and put them under her arm. And nobody said anything, and the audience thought it was a part of the thing. So we had to do it every time. And then another time, my lot, everybody was getting bunches of flowers and all that. So these people of mine who knew I would take it in the right way, they had a beautiful bouquet made up for me with silver paper and silver ribbons and everything. And in it was a bunch of celery. And these are the happy things.
Yeah.
They really were happy things.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of happy things happen to me. So fortunate.
And you've made a lot of happy things for a lot of people too, Nan.
Oh, well.
You know, we you know, so as you know, like with the cards that you make, you know, these beautiful, intricate, handmade cards. And you know, and I was in America, and I'd said to Dad, I said, actually no, I was in Australia, and I said, Dad, I didn't receive a card from Nanna this year. And Dad's like, oh. And I said, I don't want to ask her because I don't want to be rude. And then Dad's like, oh, you know, let me find out. And then Mark apparently was like, yeah, I thought I'd done something wrong. I didn't get a card. And then you were like, oh, I didn't think anyone, you know, I didn't think anyone cared that much, and I wasn't doing them anymore. And it's just, they're the high point, Nan.
Yes.
Like
well,
every birthday and every Christmas card. Yeah.
And you know, the RSL Club, they asked me, as the Women's Auxiliary, to convene a meeting for forming the bowling club, which is Pittwater Memorial Women's Bowling Club. And I was their first foundation president. Yeah. And every so often, when they have a special day, even to this day, they ask me to go back. Yeah. Which is lovely for them, really. And I've had some very, very funny things happen in the bowling green. And one that calls to mind, and it might be the good finishing thing. We had this woman that knew everything. And I had to supervise by the club to make sure that everybody could bowl correctly so they didn't dig up the green. So I sent her to the greenkeeper. he was giving instructions, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to me and he said, Lois, he said, there's nothing I can do with that woman. But she bounced back.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, he can't teach me anything. And he says, he couldn't teach her anything because she wouldn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we were playing mixed bowls on a Sunday, which was when men and women mixed, and there would be, usually with a husband and wife or partner or whatever, and there'd be 4 to a team either side.
Mm-hmm.
And you are supposed to, if you're playing in a third position, to know what insignia's on the bowl, so that anybody says to you, who's holding the shot, you're able to tell them. When she put herself third on the opposite side, and I was up there as skip, and someone asked her, and you're not allowed to say balls, it's a no-no, you say bowls.
Okay.
And in a very loud voice, she yells out, what's on your bowls, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the man that's next to me, the quietest man in the club, he was by the microphone, and he yelled back at her, 3 grey hairs and a wart. Nobody was able to play bowls for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But she was running around like a chook with no head. What did I say? What did I say? I said, I think next time it would be better if you said nothing.
Thanks, Nanna. I really appreciate you doing these videos for us.
There's no worries, yes.
Okay.